We're going to go ahead and jump into questions. So, Karen, we'll start with you. But this was for both of you. So, what does data resilience mean in the context of higher education today? And how has that definition evolved over the past few years? Kind of thinking back to sort of coming out of the
Mhm.
pandemic, there's been a lot of change. New technologies have been implemented. So, if you can kind of share your thoughts around that, that would be fantastic.
Sure. I think I'll build a little bit on what I started to say before. The things that come to mind when you say sort of the past few years, I think is probably more the past decade or so. But cloud changes things. It changes things considerably from the aspect of where our data is, as well as the inherent risks of that, how and if we are resourced to be able to have additional backups of cloud data, which we see as a way of addressing some of that, as well as the real change in how data is structured in a system like Workday or other, say, cloud ERPs versus the structured tables that used to exist, where there was a lot more there were a lot more people used to access to querying those tables and being able to work with that data in a way when we had that on-prem, and really it was fully transparent to us. Um, and of course, the big change right now is also is AI, right? So, but all of those things are having a significant impact on how we're looking at data resilience, and then the current climate of higher education. So, it's a real quick answer. But because a lot of us now are facing considerable resource constraints and threats to our operation, and so I think we talked about this before, Todd. I think it was your observation actually that you had made to us prior, which is that higher eds are back in a space where they're evaluating everything, including, spends that we were making on data and info security, that now we're sort of evaluating and saying, well, these two, but maybe not these. Like we may have to take our chances there, right? So uh it really changes the name of the game, and that actually on the how that translates to boots on the ground is people's jobs have been changed. I mean, we're actively involved in conversations right now with people in other functional areas who are adjusting to the fact that I used to be able to query this, or I used to just be able to generate my own data, and it doesn't work that way anymore. And so all of the questions that we have to address around roles, access to data, what are people doing with the data? Why do they need the access to the data? Um, all of that is coming into play. So it's affecting the flow of things. It's creating a huge amount of work for some folks, and it's frustrating other folks. So I think we're just navigating that space and understanding it's not necessarily bad, but it's the byproduct of a lot of change, and and things that I think took for granted. A lot of people took for granted are like, oh, okay, I didn't even think it was going to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm interested in what Jonathan has to say about this as well, if he's seeing the same things.
Yeah, by all means.
Yeah, so similar, building off previous answer and then what Karen shared already. I mean, data resiliency, I feel like it has to be, this is where I love to quote for my leadership on campus, the movie Shrek a lot. Everyone loves a good parfait, right? It's gotta have levels to it. It's gotta have layers, right? It's no longer just I have a backup solution. Great. Okay, what else? Like if you're not doing the training, right? You've got to have security awareness training. You've got to have a backup solution for endpoints. You've got to have a backup solution for your on-premise systems. You've got to have potentially a different backup solution for your cloud-based solutions. You also have to have contracts in place with all of these different SaaS providers that kind of detail out how they are backing up and
Mm.
what they are doing for restorations, for the timeline, for restoring full service. Where are you on the priority list? compared to other customers that are there? Can you pay to bump up the list or get into a different tier of support from them? All of these things start playing in to what we consider as part of our data resiliency portfolio. And that also includes things like the fun topic of cyber insurance, which is increasingly difficult to secure and maintain over time. As far as what's changed with data resiliency, everything would
Mm,
be the best way I would say it. I mean, the location in the last 10 years alone, the location with which our data is stored, it's no longer, it had been moving so quickly toward being on premise, potentially even on local endpoints only. Maybe you have shared redirected folders and something like that. And then OneDrive started taking off, Google Drive,
yeah.
Dropbox. You have all of these different cloud solutions for the storage. So the location, even for something simple like my data, is complicated, much less what I'm having to work with on all of these different cross institutional grants. When I was at University of Georgia previously, we had a grant with Penn State that we had to share petabytes of data between institutions. Okay, well, sharing its own challenge. How do you back up petabytes of data that may live on this campus this week, but next week it may be over there? These are challenges that at the time we didn't have great solutions for, but now we're having to build out. The size of the data is ballooned up. Who needs access to these data has changed drastically. The literacy of how to utilize these tools in more of a bring your own solution
Mm,
environment instead of bring your own devices, more bring your own reporting tool. So if someone comes in and they love Tableau, they love how it works, they love Power BI and how it looks. So they want these tools to access your data. Great. How do we allow that flexibility for people without putting too many constraints, but also protect our institutions? And the same thing applies when you're talking AI and how it has access to what access it may have, what level of authority it has inside our systems to be able to do certain things, access things. When you're building out your contracts with the AI vendors that you're working with, where are
mm,
those data stored? Are they violating regulations? For your students that may be from the EU, these are all these complex things with
yeah.
regulation changes, just add a whole nother layer. So everything has changed for data resiliency for me, even in the last 5 years, but especially the last 10.
Yeah, yeah, and that change is accelerating. I feel like one of the things with you touched on it in the SaaS space, um, that's the move, and so it's really really important to understand that responsibility model and that bifurcation. What resilience capabilities are inherent or not available, and then being able to protect that. And again, it goes back to understanding your environment, understanding where data is going. As we're talking about AI, you touched on it a little bit. But you know, it's fourth party risk. So what are the mechanisms behind the SaaS providers offering? Where is that data going? How is it protected in the models itself? So it is a complex environment to manage today. So I think it was a great summary. I appreciate that. I think we touched on it a little bit, but budgets and competing priorities in this space. So how do you balance sound resilience practices with, you know, sort of the real world challenges that we all have, which is budgetary, and how do you make that case? Jonathan, if you want to take this one to start.
I think it starts with shared governance. If IT and specifically information security is forced into a position where they're having to make that call consistently on behalf of the campus, it's not going to end well, right? Information security is looking predominantly at protection. They're looking at keeping us out of the papers, which is fantastic. None of us want to make the papers for a data breach, but more and more, it's about when that happens, how do you respond? How do you react? Not so much preventing it in the first place, because it's going to happen. You still want the protections in place to prevent it. Don't take me wrong there. But you have to have solid process on how you respond. And that's where the campus partnerships come into play. So looking at the chat, for example, Michael Aldridge, your comment on it's becoming more of an organizational resilience is spot on, right? You've got to be working with your campus partners to understand what the impact is if these data are compromised or the system is down. Are there workaround processes that give us more time to be able to restore? If so, then we have we can be a little bit more lax on some of the rules. But unless you understand what your campus needs are and how they're utilizing it, all of your decisions from an IT perspective are going to fall short, right? People are wanting to be able to access data from almost anywhere. I want flexible work schedules. I'm going to be working from Starbucks today, home tomorrow, office today, but then somewhere else on campus tomorrow. And they want access to all of these systems. So something as simple as how you set up your VPN matters drastically for protecting yourself. But you can't make it so difficult for them to get in that they're going to find workarounds.
Yeah.
That's the challenge we are facing now, is that the more structure we try to put in place, the more protections we put in place because cyber insurance requires it. Guess what? We have more people going around the rules, getting creative. We're in higher education. We encourage creative thought. Are we that surprised that people are working around our systems and policies? No, we shouldn't be.
Yeah, absolutely. Karen, love to hear your perspective.
Yeah, well, agreed on that, right? You know, we the compliance landscape has changed so much, and it affects what we have to do, and in some cases, the boxes we have to check off. Um, so um, you know, I think about it in terms of, well, one of the things I think that might be useful a little bit is real brief profile. You know, I'm at a private liberal arts institution, about 3,500 students, you know, about 1,200 or so faculty staff. It's very rough, right? And I say that because, you know, well, first of all, Jonathan's at a much larger institution than I am. And then what we're talking about is very different if you're at a public institution, which Jonathan can speak to because he was, and I have not been. So there, you know, we get it both from Jonathan today. But so all of those things come into play, and it's different depending on those contexts. And I think how it relates to this question is the prioritization also, I think, changes a little bit. I do think smaller schools tend to think we all know each other. This is good. We're all talking to each other. And we're not, you know. But also we have the culture of you know, it's a family, we're all good, you know, and it isn't. And it's not to say that I dislike my colleagues, because that's absolutely not the case. I'm just trying to say that I don't think we can't lean on that kind of comfortable sort of interaction anymore. And we do need to up the game on how to communicate with folks that actually it impacts everyone. And that we say that, and I know people don't necessarily hear that. And having just, you know, recently gone through a Workday core implementation in the middle of a Workday student implementation, I see that in action, because no matter how much we try to talk about this and what the changes are to them, and we bring up data a lot, it doesn't, until it's right in front of their face and interacting how they're doing things, it's not really well understood. As far as prioritization, and getting back to what he was saying about the shared governance, you know, the lens of enterprise risk is always kind of my first go-to, right? So, and that's not by ourselves, you know, that's to Jonathan's point, that's not just IT, right? It's the institutional enterprise risk. Where, you know, where are we at? And they're letting the folks know who are part of that enterprise risk assessment, and at the senior leadership, in our case, of the institution, so that the choices are clear. We need to just sort of lay out what is the risk of doing or not doing something. And you know, we're making those calculations every day. I mean, we cannot and are not at this point investing in everything that we probably should be investing in. And the calculation is based on risk. And you know, this climate makes you maybe even reevaluate that a little bit differently. You know, how you're calculating the risk, what becomes an acceptable risk might be changing it depending on what you're dealing with. Which is hard, and also means that people absolutely 100% plus to Jonathan, it's not IT. The key players need to understand what the risk is to the data.
Yeah.
And what the risk is to the decisions that we're making around our protections, our backups, the whole strategy around that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, a big part of it from the risk perspective is, the organization owns the risk, departments own the risk. And so part of our job, I think, is being able to articulate and tell the story. What's the why behind it? And then we can make good risk decisions. And that might be, we do need to invest more here, or maybe we can take on more risk here. But I think the key is to help our partners, and our colleagues understand what the impacts of that may or may not be in a factual way. We don't want to be
Right.
Chicken Little running around like there's risk everywhere. So we have to hone that and
Right.
narrow it, to what is the most important, and then tell the story and make it real. So yeah, I appreciate that. And we might have touched on this a little bit, thematically, but what role does, data resilience play in supporting key institutional goals such as research, student success, digital transformation? Talk through that a little bit. Maybe Karen, if you want to start with that one.
So I think it's an interesting question because on some level it's hard to abstract the data from the initiatives. But I say that as an information technology professional, and I recognize that people often actually do that. And you often have to help them through to understand, sort of connect the dots for them about why something may or may not be risky, and and what is the risk that they're accepting. Um, I think to Jonathan's point, research is really interesting. I mean, higher ed is really built on the sharing of information, and so this is always at tension, always. It's very hard um, to do this, talking to anybody. And I was recently talking to somebody who had come from the private sector and is adjusting to higher ed. And I said, yeah, that's a big adjustment, because it just on multiple levels. But germane to this conversation, right? It's an entire mindset and a culture, tied to the mission of what higher education does, which has a very rich history. That sounds very heady, but it is, right? So when you are having and required to put more, barriers and guides, and have to be like, well, it used to be a straight line, but now you're going to do this, is, that can be very difficult, for folks. And also, I think the presumption that research faculty per se, well, they must understand all the risks. They're their domain experts, so they understand all this. They don't necessarily. I mean, we do have to guide them about, what those risks are, how we should do this, how we can enable things to happen for them so that the data is flowing per se, but it's also flowing safely, and meeting their needs and their goals in that way. And that's not always the easiest thing to do, to be honest with you. It takes, it takes a lot of conversation, and it takes
Mhm.
patience. So, when any initiative comes up, I think we have to, have a lens on that, and figure out what role it may or may not be playing in that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Jonathan?
Yeah, I think Karen touched on a lot of great points, and I would say to expand on one of the last things she said is there is typically an assumption, uh, historically in our institutions, of those that own the data or that are stewards for the data understand all of the compliance around that, around those data, right? And more, that's not true. But
Mhm.
worse, I think, is IT is no longer very authoritative when in our understanding of all the intricacies
Yeah.
around compliance. So more and more, it's not just on the data steward or just on who's storing the data from an IT perspective, but now it takes someone from IT, someone from potentially InfoSec within IT as well, and oh yeah, your general counsel, and someone in contracts and grants, and someone in your libraries, all putting their heads together to come up with these interpretations for our campus and how we can be compliant with these and how we can have routine checks in place and also the ongoing training again that I'll continue to say in almost every answer, right? It becomes naturally shared because you cannot know all of it, right? And you used to be able to. And that's a challenge for a lot of people who have been on institutions in those type roles for decades plus. They're struggling with that evolution of the role at times. Another thing that really I think data resiliency has been thrust into the arena of is ethics, right? It's
Mhm.
especially as you're starting to talk about AI, right? There are things for any of us that have worked in data analytics for any amount of time, we all have an indicator that we found in our institutions is like, wow, that is a strong indicator for student success. It's also ethically gray area on whether we can actually use that, right? Those type data, who makes that decision? Right? It can't be IT. It can't be just the data steward. It's got to be a shared
Mhm.
discussion. But suddenly, that's got to be built out in our processes from the IT side on the data resiliency and how and where we back it up.
Mhm.
This particular solution is so sensitive, we have to, in addition, have air gap solution for where we back it up and 3 different solutions versus having one solution backing up in 2 different places. Like the intricacies of that and how it impacts your continuity of operations plans is headache inducing at times, honestly. It's
Mhm.
difficult to stay on top of, especially with a growing list of projects that we're all working on this side of the pandemic,
Mhm.
right? Um, but that goes into the last part, I think that where data resiliency comes into play. For me, when I think of the word resiliency, yes, it is about bouncing back from a failure, right? That's one aspect of it. But it's also about that ability for your institutions to kind of shrink and grow but
Mhm.
still have that normalcy, right? To basically be more elastic, to expand, to shrink, but to have kind of that home sizing for your environment, and to be able to grow dynamically and rapidly for fall startup, for example, or during enrollment period where
Mhm.
everyone's applying for your institution, how you store those data versus your core student data. Like you can make adjustments to have that be on-prem or that be in cloud and the rest be on premise.
Mhm.
Those type decisions that allow you to dynamically grow and meet the needs of your institution and then shrink back down and minimize the cost, especially at an institution like my prior one at University of Georgia that was public. It is a huge part about being responsible with taxpayer dollars. So you have to be very conscious about how you're spending money. So that ability to shrink and grow has to be factored into your architectural design for all of these systems and how they integrate back and how they all transport data back and forth.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. One of the things having been in the security space forever, one of the things I frequently say is security is a team sport, right? It's not just the security team, right? You have to bring in those partners, have really deep understanding of what you're trying to protect, and then apply logic to that and in the context of risk. So resilience is no different, also a team sport, right? So that's really important. I love that. Um, okay. What are the most common threats to data resilience on campus? Cyber attacks, outages, human error, funding challenges, all of the above. Karen, I'd love to hear your perspective. Start on that one.
All of the above, but the first thing that comes to mind is human error, I think. And it's not gross negligence, it's just a
Yeah.
misunderstanding, really. I feel like we've, moved the needle a little bit, with some of the eye roll inducing security training that we impart on some of our users who have to do it. But actually, we are seeing We are seeing results from that, and in a sensitized awareness that people are having, even if it's just through email. Like that's a great step one, right? Um, so I think it's impossible for that not to be sort of the thing that you worry about most. It's the, "Oh, I didn't know" thing. And I saw that somebody put that in put in the chat about about AI. So now, right, there's another whole aspect of the experience in the community around that's tied to that. I want to use AI for this. I want to use AI for that. What is the acceptable parameters around that? Is it public? What are we paying for? Who
Mhm.
has access to what we're paying for? Um, how robust are those tools? And even if we're paying for it, do we trust it? I mean, we're having constant.
Mhm.
We're not in agreement by any stretch within the institution about what needs to happen there, and being conservative. But again, it related to this question, it puts the user back in front of that, and
Mhm.
making sure that we can have all the policies in place. People have to understand it and they have to question. And I can't control if somebody takes a spreadsheet of data that they're putting into a public version of ChatGPT on some level. I really can't. We just have to hope that we are imparting upon them the risk of doing so and the liability to us in doing so. So that is foremost on our minds right now with regard to that. Funding is always a thing. There are things I think I said before that I wish we were doing that we're not doing, and we're trying to figure out how to make the right case for the risk without jeopardizing another thing that is actually probably a more important thing. Um, so so yeah, um, and bad actors, are there. We have to have the people doing it. Staffing is a challenge. We're
Mhm.
actually in the process of looking at and trying to address that from a decade ago of not having a CISO to now recognizing that it needs to be more than that, just because in order to properly follow up on everything that we're seeing, it's not having a CISO isn't enough. And you know, making that case has also been a little bit of a challenge, because once you actually peek behind the curtain and are seeing sort of what's out there getting deflected, you realize how much it is. Like, there's just so much
Mhm.
there. Um, but yeah, I think even in spite of the threats from the outside, uh, unintended carelessness on the inside is a tremendous concern.
Mhm. Yep, absolutely. Jonathan, love to hear your thoughts.
I would have to agree with Karen. The number one risk is people, and whether that be the people securing the systems or the people that are defining our terms, whether that be through data governance or other means, or whether it's just those individuals that have heightened access into our systems and heightened access to our data that go through fatigue, whether it be change fatigue is a big factor on a lot of our campuses right now. The volume and rate of change is insane for our institutions. And that's on top of the financial challenges that we've already discussed. That's on top of the staffing challenges we've already heard of, right? So people are doing more with less, my least favorite phrase. And it opens the door for just people being tired and making simple mistakes, like not checking when that MFA prompt comes across to their phone. They didn't notice it said they were coming from Illinois instead of Pennsylvania. They just clicked the button because they were recently logging into something, right?
Mhm.
Um, the the amount of information we're throwing at people, the amount of change we're throwing at people, it's human nature to make simple mistakes, and those simple mistakes are what is giving a lot of our attackers access into our systems.
Yep.
So it's less about intentional harm being done on our campuses and more the unintentional that's happening naturally or through social engineering, either way, it's the people side. The risks themselves, a lot of our traditional models are still addressing. Um, but that is where I think AI does factor in as well, because it makes it more difficult to know the difference between a real legitimate email from IT or a real
Yeah.
legitimate email from our president versus the fake ones. It used to be relatively easy to tell the difference. But now they're the AI tools make open a lot of doors for people to be able to pull and scrape information faster, easier, and put it in a way that seems logical. It can look at our communications on our our marketing websites and then look at our directories and say, okay, this person, this is how they talk. Here's an email from them. Well,
Mhm.
crap. How do I defend against that? Right. So those tools are making it much harder to defend against, but it comes down to the person. Did they click on it or not? If they
Yeah.
did, how do we respond? What are we doing to mitigate that?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean the human error element, yeah, a lot of times when people talk about insider risk, it's like, oh, somebody malicious trying to, do something untoward. But most often it's I made a mistake. Humans are going to human on that front. People are busy, sources are stretched thin, people are wearing multiple hats. Just the speed that work needs to get accomplished can, induce human error. So that's a really big part of it for sure. So I appreciate that.
I think also like media loves, I mean, television, they love to make the like exciting stuff like, oh, they're trying to get in. And of course, it's so easy to see on TV. Look how they got into that, and it's easy to buy into that and think that that's just, we should all
Hmm.
be wearing tinfoil. I'm not saying that there aren't real threats. There absolutely are. But and they are very real, but more often than not, right, what we're seeing is like, oh, actually we did that, darn, that was us. I mean, we put our style guide out there, including the actual, the RBG numbers, or whatever, for the, like, that's out there on our website. I'm like, oh, okay, well, just go take that, go ahead and make everything, I mean, it's not, it's that easy. It's not that hard. So yeah, it's interesting when you think about those kinds of things. And to your point about the change, Jonathan, like, I had somebody say to me, it's just technology fatigue. Like, I just can't. Like, I'm just checking out. It's just too much. And I get that, even though I earn my living this way, I do understand, like, that we have to, it's so, I mean, we do it for a living and to some extent enjoy it, right? That's why we're here. To people who don't, who
Hmm.
sort of see it as, even though to me it's embedded in every aspect of life, but they don't necessarily see it that way. This is just constant, and it's more and more and more, and so it becomes hard and it becomes exhausting.
Yeah, yeah. And that's a good point as well, like, both from a overarching security perspective, having controls in place, MFA, things of that nature, but also from a resilience standpoint and automating, making it easy for the user to help eliminate that, that human error, those opportunities to make a mistake, things of that nature. So yeah, evolution from a technology standpoint is at a rapid pace, and it's just going to continue to get faster. So that's super important. I always go back to that. What does that interaction look like? How do we sort of make it human proof, from that perspective? So, um, which technologies have had the biggest impact on your resilience strategy? So cloud, AI, what have you. Karen, I'll start with you.
AI, only that's top of mind right now. Cloud for sure. I said that at the beginning, and so I don't want to get too repetitive, but cloud absolutely is there, but AI, um, uh, because of its availability. Right? It's interesting, and I'm literally thinking out loud on this, so I'll probably regret it, right? But I'm thinking about the fact that cloud, part of the challenges we're talking about, are that actually the it's pushing the needle on data governance and changing access that people had. And in some ways, they have less access than they're used to having, and or having to justify it in a way that they never had to do. With AI, I worry about the opposite, which is like the availability of AI, whether it's sanctioned tools that we're providing or just the ease of getting access to them. It makes it so easy for
Mhm.
people to be like, oh, I want to do this with my spreadsheet. And I don't blame them, because I certainly leverage those tools myself.
Mhm.
And so, and we want them to, because we also want to promote efficiency. So operational efficiency is very big on our radar right now. And you have to couple that with with a higher degree of data literacy and what could potentially be risky, and what and how you're doing what you're doing with the data. So I think just because of the nature of conversations, I would put AI one right now,
Mhm.
with cloud a close second.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Jonathan, thoughts?
Yeah, I would echo cloud as being one of the bigger influencers there over the last decade, if for another reason, just data sprawl, where our data may live, is one of the bigger things that we have to adapt with. And as I've already kind of discussed in other answers, that isn't just the system in which we're storing the data, but that comes down to our data governance structures and how we're talking about these, how we're factoring them in, our contracts with the vendors. A
Mhm.
lot goes into that. So I would say that's definitely been the biggest influence. I would say one of the trickier ones has been reporting tools in general, just the sheer volume of them, right? If you pick one solution as a campus and then you hire a new provost the next year that came from a different campus that had a different reporting tool that they like to use,
Yeah.
everyone wants their dashboard, right? And giving the capability of bring your own tool is an asset a lot of us are seeing on our campus of you provide the platform, let them connect with the reporting tool that they like. Well, that's great, but we have to assume that they're not taking those data and downloading them, saving them locally as well, but they are, right? And
Mhm.
so the number of reporting tools that people are bringing to the table presents some interesting challenges, I would say for us. Um, and I would say I would also echo Karen's answer of AI, but for different reasons. For me, it's more about AI is so misunderstood on what it can and cannot do that it's contributing to the pace of change on our campus,
Mhm.
right? This idea that, oh, well, you can just take that, feed it to ChatGPT and it'll do it for you. No, no, you have to write, you have to do the prompt the right way. You have to do it in a certain order. Like there's still work that has to be done there, and it doesn't do everything, and it's not always perfect. There's still cleanup that needs to happen there. But the assumption is AI can do that. I saw on an Instagram reel that someone did this in a couple of minutes. So why isn't
Mhm.
this done yet? So the asks of our campus partners, not even the IT side, just our campus partners, student life, give me this data by end of day today. We don't even know where these data live. How are we supposed to report on it today? And what format? What are you wanting? What is your goal here? What are you trying to accomplish? Those conversations, because of the pace, are kind of going by the wayside sometimes, and we're making a lot more assumptions of our
Mhm.
campus partners right now. I'm seeing and hearing on that my own campus. I'm hearing that from others that I engage with on calls that they're getting these type requests with the assumption that AI can make it help them move faster, which isn't always the case. So that's becoming a big disruptor now, again, for different reasons that I would have expected.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Uh,
Oops.
uh, oh, go ahead, Karen.
No, I did want to, if it's okay, I didn't mean to interrupt you,
Yeah.
but I'm glad you brought that up, actually, Jonathan, that whole aspect of it. It changes the nature of what you do, but it adds another dimension to what you're doing. And so, say for me personally, I'm like, I'm really glad I'm not sitting here doing this kind of like drudge work within Excel. But on the other side now, I am doing different kind of work in terms of validation, and and making sure this is what I expect to see, and this is right, and this was derived this way, and um, basically verifying everything because you have to. I can't assume actually that it even parsed that correctly. So, and it sometimes hasn't, right? And if you ask it and point that out, it'll say it's sorry and tell you like you're right. Right. So that's now another aspect though of the change in education. It's awesome that there are we're seeing a tremendous number of people that are actually excited about it. Like when we're offering different workshops and training and cohort programs around AI tools, the uptake on those is far greater than anything we've seen for pretty much anything else we've ever offered. So on the plus side, that's good because we're able to control some of that messaging and help build in that this is the whole verification part, or this is how to ask the question part. And understanding where that's coming from, or understanding that actually it's not learning the way you think it is. Because that isn't actually how it works. And so I'm glad that Jonathan brought up all those other nuances to it as well, because there's tremendous potential. But again, with any potential comes a lot of preparation and understanding of how to use it.
Yeah, absolutely. As with any technology, it's a double-edged sword, right?
Yeah.
But I think one of the things with AI, going back to what we talked about on the human side of it, the human's actually really, really important when you're leveraging these tools, right? Like there's a range 60 to 85% AI is going to get you there, but that last, 15-20% is really, really important from a decision making standpoint. So getting validation on the outputs and putting the contextual pieces of the organization around those outputs is really important. So um okay, I think I'm gonna do a quick time check here. So we're at 10:02. Nikki, do we want to do open it up for questions? Do you want me to continue on?
We do have a couple of questions that have been posted. Certainly, I encourage the audience to paste your questions in the chat. We do have a question: to what extent use of AI tools are going to break privacy of data? I think that was kind of touched on, but if you want to expand on that, you can.
Yeah, I mean, I do think hopefully for the person who asked that question, I do think we touched on it quite a bit. I mean, I think the simple answer is that it could break it a lot if we're not actually guiding our users. And that isn't just generative AI technologies too. I think we need to consider all of the embedded ones as well. When and how that's working now with embedded systems, embedded AI in some of our enterprise tools. It's not so much, well, first of all, we have to read closely, right? What are those enterprise companies doing with that data? Are they using that data to actually make their tools work better? And sometimes they state that clearly and sometimes they don't. So that's another nuance Jonathan was mentioning as we're looking at contract review. Are we contributing, much like in a generative AI scenario, is our use of a Salesforce AI suite of tools also feeding into Salesforce's development of, and I'm not picking on Salesforce for any particular reason, but that is one where that comes up, right? And they all do. Workday, Slate, we use for admission and whatnot. So, we can't just assume the safety of the data in the system which we bought around the use of AI without making sure that we intentionally know what they are or aren't doing with that. So that's just yet another layer to think about the whole entire thing. So yeah.
Yeah. And the only small thing I have to add there is what we're struggling with as a campus at times is the new contracts coming through for our vendors that have added in or implemented AI within their tool suite.
Mm.
We're doing a pretty solid job of engaging appropriately with those vendors with our legal counsel team. The challenges we're facing are those that we just signed in the last year or two that have now added on new technologies, but we're not doing that refresh of the contract because we have a 3 or a 5 year multi-year contract because we're all trying to save money, right? that leaves you exposed for those 2 to 3 years of what could happen with those tools that you didn't have a signed agreement in place with what they're going to do with the data in their new solution that they pushed out. And so there are some challenges there that we are starting as a campus to really grapple with and figure out how to tackle.
Yeah, yeah. This is going back to like AI governance and really having that understanding. 'Cause a lot of providers are releasing these capabilities as feature requests, and then they just show up, and it's not necessarily something that you had insight into when you onboarded them. And so that ecosystem of third parties within your environment that are introducing that capability and having that insight is a challenge to manage that risk because it's a different dynamic for sure.
We do have another great question. And again, some of these things are touched on, but can be expanded on. How can data cataloging tools strengthen institutional data resilience? And what lighter weight alternatives exist for organizations that find enterprise catalog platforms too complex or costly?
I, I don't mind starting with this one, Karen. I don't think 6 minutes is enough to really do this one justice. Oof, I think for a lot of people I've talked with so far, for just full awareness, like for Villanova, we're investing in more Azure Data Factory. We're a heavier Microsoft shop, whereas my former institution was much more AWS. And so we were able there to start looking at tools like AWS Glue for cataloging. But both of those are big chunks to bite off, and they're difficult to navigate the conversations on campus with, and they're costly and unpredictable cost as well. So each of them have their own set of challenges that I would say don't bite off without some forethought and some real planning involved in it, and really focus on the one where if you are invested heavily in one or the other cloud platform, maybe go that route. But there are plenty of other tools that aren't AWS and Microsoft out there that you can utilize. I think the challenge I'm seeing and observing myself is that people are trying to utilize and implement these tools without really understanding the overarching cost and long-term cost of doing that, but they also don't have proper governance in place yet. And without proper governance, these tools aren't going to be helpful. It just throws a bunch more data at you when you're struggling to already grapple with the amount of data you have on campus and all these different solutions. And you are left, whether that's from the libraries or from the IT side, which are the two areas that tend to own these type tools, you're the one stuck with figuring out, well, do I accept this? Do I need to tackle this? What do I do with these? Without proper data governance and shared governance of services, it's going to be a beast to undertake, and it can actually create, I would say, more problems for you. So
Mhm.
start with the data catalog, start with the data dictionary, start with data governance. That's my recommendation. As long as you get that solid, then you can mature into a cataloging tool potentially.
Yeah, I can just echo there. We are not at cataloging tool level, and I would say that we've got a bit to go before we would be there. So I don't think I can speak deeply on it. I do know that there are some open source tools out there, in terms of adjusting cost, but I think, just pretty much what Jonathan said. I think you have to have the other stuff in order first, regardless of which way you go.
Yeah.
Todd, I don't see any other questions in the chat. So if you would like to share that final slide for them to connect with you, and then I can close it up.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Karen, Jonathan, thank you so much for being here today and kind of going through um, your content and doing questions. And but I would say if you are planning to attend the EduCAS conference that's coming up, please, I encourage you to visit the CrashPlan booth. 1862, we have a lot of great people there, a lot of good conversations that we can carry forward from today's talk. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The content for today's webinar was developed by CrashPlan, and they are an EDUCAUSE strategic partner. EDUCAUSE is working closely with CrashPlan this year to strengthen the collaboration between private industry and higher education institutions so that we can ultimately evolve the higher education technology market. So please be on the lookout for other opportunities to connect with CrashPlan throughout the year as well as at annual. I want to thank you so much, Karen, Jonathan, and Todd, for sharing your expertise today. And to our audience, thank you so much for joining. Be sure to give us your feedback using that link that I provided in the chat. Thank you all for attending again, and have a great day.
Thanks so much.